This is the Big Fish Cares Podcast. Big Fish Cares Podcast. And here's your host, Benny Fisher.
All right, we're back with another episode. This is going to be a really exciting episode. I feel like I'm starting to level up my podcast game. I'm getting bigger and better guests every single time. I was on a Facebook post the other day, and Steve Sims, who's a big-time keynote speaker at different events, was posting something about a podcast, and he said, "Hey, I'm looking to get on some shows." Little lonely Ben Fisher said, "Hey, Steve, will you be on mine?" Next thing you know, Eli was in the room, and me and Eli go back a few months now from chatting, and Eli's like, "Yeah, I'm going to get on your podcast too." So I have Eli Wilde with me, who is the creator of Wilde Influence and the top performing corporate trainer for Tony Robbins. He's worked with thousands of people to transform their lives and their businesses. If it has anything to do with influence, impact, and communicating your message, Eli is definitely the guy to help. I've been truly inspired just by Eli's content on Facebook. If you're not following him on Facebook, you should check him out. Even if you're not in sales, he is somebody that'll brighten up your day every time you turn on your computer. Welcome to the show, Eli. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. Thanks so much for that amazing introduction.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been cool getting to know you over, the last, 6 months on social media, and I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule. Let's just get right into it. Tell me about how you got to a point to where you were Tony Robbins' top sales guy. Like, where did you start out at in your career? Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your childhood, and how you got to work with Tony.
I'll give the condensed version of it. I grew up in Maryland, small town, was voted the quietest kid in high school, really shy, really weird. Couldn't even get a sentence out or look somebody in the eye or shake somebody's hand without getting nervous and stuff like that. But like all of us, I had friends. I saw people that got the girl, got the money, really charismatic, really charming. And I remember a specific day, my mom worked at a country club, and we never made more than 14 grand in a year. So we were always really, really not well off. And I wore the hand-me-down clothes of the wealthy kids, and they kind of made fun of me as I was growing up and everything. And I remember one day seeing a man walk into a room at the country club, and when he spoke, people listened. And there was something about the way his presence, his tone, the way he articulated, is just an essence of who he was. And people responded very differently to him than they did in people in my own family or me. And it was the first time it really planted a seed. There's something to this aspect of communication that has an impact on people. And I became really curious back then as to what they were doing that I clearly wasn't. And a lot of it was my own fear, self-judgment. A lot of times we judge ourselves, but I really was weird in a lot of ways too. So that internal communication, not just when we think about sales or self-development or communication and getting money, whatever it is, there's external communication, but there's internal. And I knew I had some things that were off there. And, very long story short, we were pretty much down to our last dollar, me and my mom, about out on the street. We had the conversation. She's like, "You're at the movie with your father. I don't know what I'm going to do." And she took our last dollar and she played the lottery and she won $7 million. And so she gave most of it away, but it's a long story. So I've given you the really condensed versions of all
that. Dude, that's cool, man. You really mean down to the last dollar? You're not just telling me that. That's part of this. That's a real story.
Real story. And the fascinating thing was, though, my mom told me, and it was very just dramatic how it all happened, but I knew that it was going to change our lives. But I didn't tell anybody, none of my friends or anybody until it was known. So I didn't tell anybody for a week, and then it was known. And I knew how this thing that had nothing to do with me was going to change people's perceptions of me. And so I got really curious. And now we see people with the Lambos and all of that, and they're trying to create this persona. And it really kind of created a seed in my mind that, whether it's following a religion or anything in social media, it's even if you meet somebody for the first time, there's a perception of authority that maybe somebody doesn't have authority, but there's a perception of authority. And the people that are the best at communication and influence, they're really good at creating unconscious authority based on their tone, their body language, their movement, eye contact, where you know that you're talking to somebody that's worth listening to, not just based on the content of what they say, but based on your perception of who they are. Because if Warren Buffett gave you some sage financial advice, you'd probably take it. And you've never met him, but you have a perception of who he is. But if a bum on the street gave you that same advice for word, you wouldn't take it. So it really got me into not so much the content of our communication, but the perception of the quality of our communication. So how do we create that inside of people's minds? But before I get ahead of myself, I ended up, I didn't plan on going to college or anything. I had a Marine pen pal since I was in the 4th grade. I thought my destiny was to go into the military just because we were broke, and I saw that as a way out. And universe or God or whatever had a different plan for me. And I ended up going to university, and I felt really out of place because I never took any of the college prep courses. And I just felt, I didn't take classes, and I just, I took Ritalin my whole life, had ADHD, and it was just really hard for me to concentrate. But my senior year of college, I met a girl that worked in the White House for Clinton. And she was like the highest person in her job, secretary to the Secretary of Education. So she was a special assistant to him. And she was just so smart. So her class and character and the way she carried herself and seeing the way that people responded to her, very pretty and articulate and all of that, but she just had a presence about her. And being around her, dating her for a few years really began to set me on a path. And she helped me get a job when I moved to California, where I was selling dental products over the phone to dentists. And we've all had that first experience where you listen to yourself on the voicemail and you're like, do I sound like that? I sound terrible. But I remember, like it was yesterday, being in my little cubicle with my manager sitting right next to me, listening to my sales calls live. And as I would call these dental companies and try to get the dentist, try to get past the gatekeeper, all of that, I didn't articulate my words. I mumbled, I stuttered, all of that, or I wasn't really direct and clear. And just something was off, and I'd get hung up on. And it's just, we make these snap judgments so quick. And I started doing a lot of work on myself around then, my voice, speaking. And because of Erica, the girl I dated, through her, I also met this guy who was a manager for actors. He managed like Jim Carrey, Tom Welling, the guy who was Superman on Smallville. And we just all became really good friends. And then one day, his guy, Tom Welling, got turned down for the role of Superman Returns, back like 2004. And he turned down, they thought I'd be good for it. So they trained me for the role of Superman and put me through the classes.
You look like a Superman.
Thanks. I'm 40.
Yeah, you look like a Superman.
44
Clark Kent,
now.
baby.
So I'll be 45 here soon. But back then I was like, I looked the part. I was like in crazy shape, and they believed in me, and I did screen tests and all of that. And to take the idea of feedback even further, when you listen to your own voicemail, you think your voice sounds terrible. You have somebody else listen to it with you, you become even more self-conscious. But when you take acting classes, on-camera classes, they'll put a camera right on your face and you're reading a script and you can see all the uncertainty in the eyes. Like if you don't know what you're going to say and 1,000 different ways to say it in the moment, like it's really, you just see all the uncertainty, and you need to train that out of you. And I ended up getting a DUI and making all these really stupid decisions, so I didn't get the Superman role. And I thought to myself, I had some regret then. I don't now at all. But I was like, man, I didn't regret not getting it. I regretted the fact that I didn't go for it 1,000%. And I got really curious because in LA or in acting or in speaking or in sales or in business, you see these people with amazing talent that can do anything, but they often do nothing. And then you see people that don't have the best talent that work so hard and they really make it. And I got really curious, what is it about a human being that makes somebody really successful or they push through outside of talent? Because unrealized talent is almost like a joke. There's so much unrealized talent in the world. And then you see these people like, on YouTube or Instagram, like running races, then they don't have legs, like lifting weights and doing this clean and jerk and they got one freaking arm. And I was like, man, what is it about these people? And what is it about me that makes me rely on my excuses and my victimhood and all these stories that I have? And I found a body of work. I was searching one night, just kind of reading books on confidence and self-hypnosis and things like that. And I came across this blog article on something called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And it talked about the mind and our emotions and how we can kind of reprogram ourselves. And I was just fascinated by it. And I got into these principles, was reading stuff just online and whatever books I could get a hold of. And I was talking to a friend of mine and he says, well, you should check out Tony Robbins. And I was like, who's Tony Robbins? And he's like, you don't know who Tony Robbins is? I was like, who's Tony? He's like, you don't know who Tony Robbins? I'm like, who is Tony Robbins? And he,
you living under a rock back then or what, man? He's in Shallow Hal.
I know. And I actually seen the movie, but you just didn't put two and two together, you know? And I ended up getting Tony's book, Unlimited Power. And you can read books like Think and Grow Rich or any of these success books, and they talk about success principles. But often we know what to do, but we're not doing what we know, or we don't follow through. And so he really talked about the emotions, what drives human behavior, what gets us to do the things that we know we need to do or not. What are the patterns of thoughts and feelings and emotions that we can begin to train like a muscle? We can train ourselves emotionally to become more resilient. And it just really spoke to me. And the way that he talked, even his written voice, like there was something there about this man that I really liked. And then I got his tapes, and this guy's talking, and there's like, he's like, I got no fucking script, baby. I'm just here talking to you. And I found myself 8 hours, 9 hours straight just listening to this man. I couldn't get enough. And about a week after that, he was going to be at this event called the Learning Annex, kind of like Success Resources is now. They do these big, huge events where they get you all pumped up and try to sell you some stuff. And I had been to those things before, and I was like, it's going to be whatever. And it's the no money down real estate guy, the tax savings guy, the Forex trading guy, the, whatever. And at this event, there was Donald Trump, Robert Kiyosaki, Susie Orman, and Tony Robbins, the headliner. And I saw a big picture of Tony's face there. I was like, I'm going to go. It was $97, which was a stretch for me. And it was like thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And I was all the way in the back. Tony was supposed to speak for 2 hours, but at the end of it, he had spoken 4.5, and the audience was just riveted. And at the end of those 4 hours, he's like, if you got anything from these 4 hours, spend 4 days with me, I'll change your fucking life, or I'll give you your fucking money back, sign the fuck out. He was just like so certain. And he was like challenging you, but you could tell that he cared. And I was like, whatever this dude is selling, like I am buying this. And I used my rent money to sign up for his seminar, Unleash the Power Within. And I went through a lot there, not just in the room, but I was in such a place of financial struggle that the fact that I went all in on myself and some of the things happened there made me just realize I didn't want to let it go. And I got, like any good business-minded person would, Tony talked about some principles there, like the ultimate success formula: know your outcome, keep on changing your approach until you get it, and whoever's more flexible will win in the end, and conditioning your certainty, all this stuff. So I made some connections there, got some names, and I ended up weeks later down in San Diego. And the vice president of the company at the time gave me a script. He said, come back in 2 weeks, deliver this in front of the company, don't fuck up a word, and we'll consider you if you can do that. I came back, I destroyed this thing. Like I killed it. And I took those 2 weeks, I wrote out the script, I recorded myself, I slept with it playing. I was just like a man obsessed. And I went down there and they bumped me up to kind of a higher level because I had done really well. But then when I got the job, you're not connected to Tony. You get dropped off in cities, you're outside of Denver or Philadelphia or New York, and you're just door knocking. And as the low man on the totem pole, the new guy, I'd get all the shitty meetings because there's companies that are really good to go into, but it seemed really not fair. I'm going to used car lots and I'm going to banks where they have to work on the weekend and they can't go. And looking back on it, that made me really strong. And so I was just really committed and I worked really hard. And if you had asked anybody after a year who the best speaker was, I didn't have the best numbers. Not always. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't, but people really believed in me. And so I made some good connections in the company where I got additional training from Roberto Monaco, who was kind of in charge of everything, and he's my best friend. And then Tony had his son join the company because Tony's son, Jarek, wanted to be a speaker. But Tony said to his son, it's one thing to be a speech maker and give a good speech, but there's only one way to know if you're actually good. People vote with their dollars, because people will they'll clap for you and say, oh, you did a good job, good job, good job, good job, because people are actually pretty nice. But if they're not paying you, if you've not demonstrated some value in this communication by creating a gap for them and giving them something to live into, painting that vision of the pain and where they're at by staying the same and showing by example, challenging and doing this thing, he says, that's how you find out if you're good. That's how you get good quick. So he said to his son, you need to look at the top sales guy. And that just happened to me at the time. And it was really fortunate for me also because Tony's brother-in-law had wanted to join the company, Scott Humphrey, who pretty much runs the company now. And he ended up, so very long story short, Scott did kind of a ride along with all the speakers that were speakers for Tony, and saw all of them. And everybody was good. We all had the same script, selling the same products, same everything. But Scott saw me speak like last. And Scott said to Tony, Scott said to his sister, who's, Tony's wife, said, "You have this guy, Eli." He just man, unbelievable. So ended up Scott and Tony's son lived with me. So the three of us lived together for about 2.5 years. And working for Tony, if you're a fanboy like I am, you're just mesmerized by the guy. So you've got all these questions. And so I'm like, hey, Jarrett, can you ask your dad this? Hey, Scott, when you talk to Tony, can you ask him this? So vicariously, I was being coached by Tony by asking him probably the dumbest questions in the world. Like, how do you handle this objection or whatever? And Tony would send me these voice notes, or send Jarrett these voice notes, or send Scott these voice notes, and they let me listen to them. And it wouldn't be like, hey, just say this. It would be like the most profound, mind-blowing example that would reframe my brain as to why I was even getting the objection. The fear, really understanding what was happening inside of that prospect and what I needed to be looking for. And so when you have people in sales or looking to enhance their communication, even in the dating world or whatever it is, they're always like, well, what should I say? And if they say this, what should I say? If you're an actor, you say your lines, and that's how communication goes. Inside of acting, inside of a box, inside of a vacuum. But that's not how life works. And you need to notice all the things that are in the unsaid. And you need to build connection and rapport and responsiveness and trust. And you can't follow a script because everybody's different. And so even by the fact of the nature that we're looking for the perfect thing to say, we're kind of missing the mark. And the word sin, not like you're killing people like a sin. Even in the Bible, the word sin just means to miss the mark. It's actually a term from archery. Like to sin means you just missed the bullseye. And the perfect script or the perfect thing is a sin. You're missing the mark because it's not so much about what you say. It's about what they hear and what they respond to. And inside of any great sales process or any process of communication, influential communication with your kids or your wife or your husband or your stranger on the street, it's understanding that we all do things for emotional reasons, justify it logically, we've heard that, but the target is to create these emotions. And once I got really good at sales, of course I had all these scripts and I was like everybody downloading everything and watching everything and buying every sales course. And the first place I went was the objection handling. I was like, if I can just handle all the objections, but whatever we focus on expands. So I was basically just preparing myself for war. And that's not how you want to be. And I figured out some ways on how I could reframe people over and over again to get the objections to be even irrelevant based on their identity, based on this connection, the trust in themselves and me, the process, and creating this really strong gap, which I'll touch on. But I remember thinking to myself, there's this chain of events that have to happen inside of somebody before them to do something. And if I want them to take action, I want them to buy. If I only focus on them buying, I'm pushy. I have that commission breath because my outcome is to get them to buy. But I realized that all actions, if somebody buys or doesn't buy, is preceded by a thought and a feeling. And I remember I said, if they don't buy, well, they're thinking these things and they're feeling these things. And if they buy, they're thinking these things and they're feeling these things. So my target was to get people to think and feel and believe certain things about themselves, what they deserve, about who they really are, certain things, believe certain things about my process, and believe certain things about me. We call it the trust trinity. And so those became the targets. And we found a way to begin with that end in mind and reverse engineer the process through communication to create this level of connection, this level of gap, and this level of certainty in the process and in what somebody can do in their future. But as you probably heard me say a lot of times, I would say when I would go into these companies, I was selling salespeople, and so I couldn't do any of the cheesy techniques because they'd already seen all this. But I had this belief that, when two people meet, the person that's more certain will influence the other person. So my mantra was always, my certainty will overcome their doubt. And that's one side of it and I don't always teach this, but I always say my certainty overcomes their doubt. And so I had to condition my certainty, number one. Like when I did an event a few years ago with Jordan Belfort, right before I went on stage, somebody asked me, "Are you nervous?" And it threw me off for a second, and it made me get really present. And I thought for a moment, I was like, "Am I nervous?" And I was like, "No," because I was so prepared. And then I thought to myself, if anybody's, it was like 1,200 people. I thought to myself, if anybody's nervous in this room, it's them. I'm the only one here that knows what's going to be talked about. I'm the only one that knows what's going to happen. And you only get to that level of certainty when you're prepared in what you're going to do and what you're going to say, but prepared in where you want to take people emotionally. And so a lot of times when you connect with an army of one or an army of 1,000 or a group of whoever, a lot of times we have uncertainty because there's some things that we've not prepared for. But the thing is, you can't prepare for everything. So you need to prepare yourself emotionally to be able to deal with anything that can come your way, which is a whole nother thing. And the other side of the coin, I always said, my certainty overcomes their doubt. But the other side of it is my skilled questions and framing creates their doubt. And so if I have a lot of certainty and they have a lot of certainty, I have certainty they should do it, they have certainty they shouldn't do it, well, we might bump heads, but I could skeptically ask questions. I could do some things with my tone and my reframing patterns, and I could get them to doubt themselves. Doubt what they're doing.
What's the difference?
What's that?
Yeah, what's the difference between certainty and conviction?
Well, I think it's similar. You know, some people might say a conviction is even stronger. You know, because certainty, like even if somebody has certainty in something, like they don't doubt it anymore. But a conviction is almost like it's just like it's supercharged to me. You know, it's even more.
There you go.
And it's harder, not impossible though, to crack somebody's certainty in anything. And the way that we do that, and you know, I've done this a lot of times at events. I say the way you get somebody to doubt something is get them to question it. So a conviction, once it's like something's like a solid like a conviction in you, you no longer doubt it anymore. There's no doubt.
What if you don't know the answer to something and you truly are thrown off a little bit and you haven't figured out what that outcome is and somebody does throw you off? How do you?
Well, that's the internal belief that no matter what comes up, it's a good thing and I'm going to be able to use this. And years ago, I had done a presentation at it was like a network. It was like a pretty crappy meeting and it was about 50 people there. And it was like a bunch of those. It was like a meeting hall, like a chamber of commerce type place. It was a bunch of rounders, like round circles, like circle tables. So half the audience has their back to you, which is freaking annoying, you know, or they're all kind of just turned like this, you know, and so it's kind of weird. And like I had to get these people without saying, hey, turn your chairs. Like I'd said that, but some people still didn't. And say, hey, you know, here's what you need. So I would do these things and I started engaging with people and touching them and things like that, not in a weird way, but that makes people respond to you. And if you do one thing to one member in your audience, you do it to everybody. So you have to be mindful of any time there's possible conflict with one audience member. Because if one person turns against you, the whole audience, because it's kind of like one group. So I did a lot of things to tie the group together, but specifically at this one time, I was going through my presentation. I'd done literally over 1,000 times the same presentation. So I kind of had parts of my presentation that I was just going through the motions, not fully present. And this woman asked me something mid-sentence that threw me off. And it was kind of rude. And it made me just pause.
Little pattern interrupt.
And it made me pause and smile. And I looked at her after probably 8-10 second beat. And I said, thank you. I said, you just got me really present. And I appreciate that question so much. And it was authentic and it was real. And it made me realize how much of not only my presentation, but how much of my life I wasn't fully present. And I was like, that is a gift to get present. That's a present, like it's a gift. And I wanted.
I struggle with that.
And especially when you've done something.
I'm always thinking about the next step. I'm always trying to think like, okay, I'm always like one step ahead in a conversation. Part of that's just because of the way my brain works, but part of it's also because it's like I'm always trying to figure out what that next outcome is and then trying to pivot for that. And I always want to be one step ahead of whoever I'm talking to for any reason. So what kind of advice do you give to people to become present?
I think we do that, you know, with chess moves and all of that, you should be able to think a few moves ahead for sure. But you really And so we often ask people this question: the most successful people in the world, where's their focus usually? The past, the present, or the future? And people guess, but they're focused on the future, but with a strong association to the present. So it's right to be outcome minded. And whether it's a sales call or you're with your mom, always have an outcome. Napoleon Hill called it definiteness of purpose. Like, you've got a purpose for where you're taking the conversation. That's got to be there. And it becomes conditioned. It's like part of you. And that, as a leader, as a great salesperson, I think that has to be innate in you. Like, it's attached to your identity. So I tell people, like when I'm coaching people, I say, look, we're going to get present, we're going to get real, but we're not here to have chats. We're not just, this is a conversation to move your life forward. And when I do like a seminar, I'm doing a seminar at my house, I'm going to create a really strong frame in the beginning where it's like, hey, you're here to learn, but how many fucking people learn some shit and don't do anything? The whole point of this is for you to do something. So at the end of this presentation, you commit to take some action. So that's me also planting a seed. At the end of this presentation, you're going to commit to take some action, which is where I'm going to sell them. And so I'm going to basically be building up all this commitment and consistency, little small commitment frames inside of their mind as to what they need to do, but who they need to be by the end of this. You need to be a committed action taker by the end of this. Are you willing to do that? But first, think of all the places in your life you've said you were going to commit, but didn't. Keep lying to yourself. We're going to have a real conversation here. But the whole outcome of this is to get where you're supposed to go faster. Because do you want to go there faster? Are you willing to make some sacrifices now so you can get what you want faster? So I'm framing them over and over again through all of my communication. But specifically, to answer your question, I believe as a leader, it's part of my identity when, as a coach, I'm a person who moves people forward. And so that's there. So it's in me, and I can't help at any point. If I'm talking to my mom, I'm like, okay, where are you going with this? But I try to be as present as possible. So it's a balance. And I'm noticing, I'm specifically looking for, depending on the level of coaching, if I'm doing almost like therapeutic coaching, somebody's got traumas or whatever, I'm looking for the patterns in their thoughts, their language, where their mind goes, where their eye goes, things that stump them. And we do kind of like a detailed personal history where the person allows me to really explore some of the significant emotional events that have shaped them, that they attach some disempowering meaning to. And so we'll dig into that work. But that level of work that I do, because I'm looking so intently for those patterns now, forces me to be present, because I'm not just focused on here's what they're going to say. I'm noticing all of the incongruencies in what they say, because people say they're going to make money, they're going to get in shape, they're going to do all these things, but there's patterns in their communication that have them out of alignment or incongruent. So I'm specifically looking for subconscious communication, meaning the things that they're not saying with their words.
So you said a couple of things there. You mentioned mom, and I was just getting ready to ask you a follow-up question about your mom, because I'm thinking about young Eli, and now I'm thinking about Eli now. What was the biggest, how did your mom handle this transition and this transformation of quirky, weird, young Eli to where now it's like power influencer Eli? And how did that relationship evolve over time? Because I feel like I'm still kind of going through that with my mom, because sometimes in my head I still think I'm that 14-year-old kid, and that she I'm trying to figure out how to best communicate with her, because her level of communication and study and research on the types of things that I'm learning doesn't go at the same speed as me. So the gap just keeps getting bigger and bigger. How have you handled that over the years?
There's these sequential steps in helping somebody. The first one is always to make somebody feel understood and appreciated. And you cannot influence somebody in any way if they feel judged by you. And so, especially with our parents, it's really tough because we kind of judge them a lot. And I would have done it different, and we have all this emotion and all this history. And, if you're a parent, you don't want your fucking kid telling you what to do. And if you're young, you're doing all these things and your parents aren't learning anymore. So you want to tell them all the things. And so it creates a lot of this conflict, and it's not always easy for me. And, I think, especially now, my dad passed last year, And, my mom's all I got. And so, you think about it, she's like a certain age and I don't see her every day. And so you start to think about your parents, like once you really get realistic, and it's, not fun to say, but how many conversations am I going to have with this person? Like how many more are they? And if say you're 40 and you don't live in the same state or city as your parents and you see them for the holidays a couple times a year, you'll probably maybe see your parents 30 to 60 more times in your life. And that's it.
Somebody told me that the other day. I saw that on a Facebook post or something like that. And if you see your parents, 6, 7 times a year, even 10 times a year, and you only have, 20, 30, your parents only have 20 years left, maybe. That's not that many times,
Yep.
And if it's even less if you don't have the means to see each other. So it makes every conversation important. Do you ever get in the early days? Sometimes I find this with my mother is I'm trying to almost hard seller on my ideas and the way things should be, and I'm trying to teach her faster because I don't have that much time for her. But then the gap is big, and then sometimes I just catch myself just wanting to sit there and be like, yeah, Mom, I got you, and just kind of it's like a hard thing to find the middle, right, of where's the line at to try to get them to see something a little bit differently. What do you say to that?
Well, it's often our own egos that feel that we even need to teach this person something, Yeah. Yeah. It's if you teach, say your mom's 65, what is she going to do with this information? And so golden years is kind of a season of life for a lot, not for everybody. Some people are working. Look at Donald Trump or Warren Buffett. These people are working hard in their 70s, they're different. And they're built for that. My mom's not built for that. And so I can't make her into that, and I'm not going to give her some Tony Robbins distinction that's going to, make her want to just, yeah. She went through it a couple times, maybe 2, 3 times, and it was life-changing for her. But that's also the gift of that experience, because you could take your parents to a transformational event like Tony, but if you tried to take your mom through Tickens yourself, it's too much there. So having a third party deliver that, that's a lot of relationships have healed at transformational events like Landmark, like MITT, like Tony Robbins. You go there, or send them there on their own, like a date with destiny, and they come back with a different level of appreciation for you. It's great when you can do it together, but even that sometimes isn't good, or you should sit in different places in the room. But that's the point of those events, because that's part of the magic of it, because things can be said there in this environment that you can't do yourself. You can try. It's just not going to work out. That's why people see therapists. Even just doing 2 of you and a therapist, like marriage. All of that. A Tony Robbins event or something like that. It's 10 years of therapy shoved into a weekend, and it's a lot of fun. So I'm obviously I'm a big proponent.
Well,
of that
me
stuff.
too. I did Unleash the Power last year. I think I've been into this stuff for, many years now, and I've been in sales my whole life. But when I actually went to that event and I took my girlfriend with me, we had an experience. It was an experience that I'll never forget. It was that full immersion, 4 days. Tony's 2 out of the 4 days, the 16-hour day. Walking on fire, doing it together, writing down all your fears, writing down who you are. Tell the people at home just a little bit quickly, what is the Dickens effect? And then have you ever did the Dickens effect at an event? Have you ever led that before?
Yeah. It's and we have, for me, I'll say a couple of things here. One, with anything Tony Robbins based or therapy based or whatever, part of my unique selling ability is I've taken all of these frameworks that are based in therapy, and I've found a way to install them into influence and sales, including the Dickens. And so the Dickens process in of itself, it's based on an understanding that we all do things as human beings to gain pleasure or avoid pain. And some people might say it's painful to be broke. It's painful to be out of shape or in a bad relationship. But if it was painful enough, like putting your hand on a hot stove, you'd change. And so with all problems, there's also something called secondary gain. So somebody might say, well, I'm broke, but now they get to hang out with people, talk about how they're broke, so they get connection with other broke people, and they have this little broke pity party. Or somebody says, Oh, you were raped. Oh, I was raped 10 times. This is even worse for me. And so now they get significance. Oh, you think you got it bad? Look how bad my kids are. Look how bad my life is. And so they're getting their needs met through a really shitty vehicle. And it's like, it doesn't sustain them. And so people are getting some positive reward for the negative thing they say that they don't want. And so they're incongruent. They have beliefs in conflict. Like, hey, it'd be great to make lots of money, but then I get all this fame and attention and people are asking me for money. I don't want the responsibility. And so they have conflicting beliefs, and so they stay stuck. And so what people will do when they say something's painful, say they're in a painful relationship or something, they're like, oh, well, it wasn't that bad in the past, so maybe the future will be different, or it's going to get better. So they start time zone jumping instead of doing something now. Well, it wasn't that bad before, it'll get better in the future, or, it's not that bad, or they just do some kind of justification. And so to really understand, again, this foundation of all change, people do things to gain pleasure and avoid pain. They don't have enough pain associated to the limiting thought or behavior or pattern of some sort in their life. So the process of the Dickens is taking you through a long, about a 6-hour process in total, of getting you to associate enough pain to the biggest limiting belief or pattern or thought that you have about yourself or other people. And so, like, if, say, with my mom, if I believe on some level that I need to change her and that something's wrong with her, and I get to be right, and I get to be smart, and I get to show her, well, it's like kind of pleasurable for me to put her in pain. But it's got to be massive levels of pain on an unconscious level for me to change that. And so the process is finding any pattern of behavior or thought or whatever that is limiting the quality of your life in some way, relationship, health, finances, whatever, and just anchoring enough pain in the past where you realize all that it's cost you, what's missing in your life today, and you take it out all the way to 20 years carrying that same belief and pattern and really experiencing now what that pattern will cost you for the rest of your life. And that's where people begin the process of change.
That's so powerful. I mean, I don't know how many times. Do you think it's okay for somebody to go through that process every year, even because everyone's always transforming, or do you think it loses its effect if you go to too many Unleash the Power events?
I think it's, but again, like, I'm a junkie for this stuff. So I'm like asking a crackhead.
Are you on the floor, like, freaking out, like, every single year that you go? Like, I mean, is it like, are you like fully immersed in it? Like, every time, like, you put yourself there? It's a dark place. They make you go to a dark place.
I think if you do it enough times, and I've done UPW over 40 times, I think one of the things that you can take from it is, even if you don't go through it mentally yourself, but you just experience how much pain and the crying and the screaming and just how much pain people are in. I think if you walk into that room sometimes with that lens, it'll help you look out into the world and realize that so many people are just one question away from popping, just about to erupt. And it just really builds some compassion in you that everybody has that much pain in them. Yeah. So I think
I saw a room full of people and I'm thinking, like, wow, like, and that was just the room full of the high achievers, because you want to go there for change, right? You're paying money to go there. Like, you're already in the top, like, I call you 2% in the entire world that even like is aware enough to go to an event like that. The other thing I want to touch on real quick is you mentioned that you take your trainings from different things that you've learned, and you mentioned NLP, and that's kind of what Tony's been known for. I listened to a podcast with you and Jeremy Miner probably, I don't know, a couple months ago or something like that. I don't know when you guys released that, maybe a year ago, I think it came out. But Jeremy Miner is known for NEPQ, which is different than NLP. Tell me a little bit about you and Jeremy Miner and NEPQ and how you've kind of taken some parts of that and put it in your course.
Jeremy I signed up for all of Jeremy's stuff 2015, and he's coached me on stuff. And now I have the benefit, I coach him on the speaking stuff, because that was really how I sold, was one to many. And he did all sorts of like corporate sales. And there's tons of books out there in question-based selling. And a lot of the stuff, I had seen a lot of his questions before from different books, but he put them into a really organized syntax: connection, situation, problem awareness, probing, clarifying. And, it really helped me a lot with the labeling of different questions as people go through a sequence. And I take everything, in NLP, Tony took a lot of those frameworks and just made them his own. He called it NAC instead of neuro linguistic programming, called it nervous system associative, creating a different association, conditioning. Just like conditioning a muscle at the gym, we can condition people emotionally. So it's a process of conditioning people and not programming them like a computer. Just like going to the gym, we've got to train. That's why I love going to self-development. That's why I like going to the gym. I'm training myself to be emotionally more resilient human being. And that's really the work. With what Tony did, the base thing is this first tool that he teaches at UPW, teaches 6 human needs, and he teaches the triad. So I always ask the question, why do people do things, logic or emotion? We all know it's emotion. And so Jeremy's process, NEPQ, neuro, emotional, persuasion, questions. And so one part of the triad is focus. The other part is language and meaning. And the other part is physiology. So NEPQ, the question part, it does more than just this, but it's part of my sales process. I use some of those questions and a bunch of other stuff. But the focus. So whatever we focus on, we feel. I've asked you 20 questions about the best day of your life, you'd probably feel good because you're focused on it. If I asked you 20 questions about the worst day of your life, you'd feel bad. And so we want people to not just ask the questions is what I'm after, because the goal isn't to ask a bunch of questions. Questions are a tool to elicit specific information. And so what we're doing with those questions is we're controlling focus. I could ask you about your shoes. Where'd you get those shoes? How much you pay for those shoes? Do you like those shoes? Where do you wear those shoes? And you're focused on your shoes. And if I ask you 20 questions about your mom, there's something there. And so as I'm asking you, focusing your attention on something, I'm going to notice things inside of you. Am I on track or not? And so some of that is beyond just reading a script, because it's not about reading a script. But questions are a great tool to control focus, which is one part of the triad. The other part of the triad, there's focus and language and meaning. And so what I'm simultaneously doing with our process is not just using questions, it could be stories or teaching different frameworks that put people in a place where I want them to go to create the right, what I call the buying state. If somebody doesn't buy, well, they're in a non-buying state. There's a pattern of focus, meaning, and physiology. When, like, you've had times where you go to the store, you didn't need to buy something, but you just bought something, you just felt like it. You had times where you needed to buy something, you went to the store, somebody asked you, you had a bad experience with a sales rep, and you didn't buy. And so sometimes we're in a good state, sometimes we're not in a good state, or somebody can put us in the right state or take us out of the state. And so understanding state management as you, the communicator, as the leader, like, you need to be in the right state. And we've all had times where we feel like we can run through walls and we can do anything. And you have other days where you wake up and you feel like you can't spell your own name correctly. Like, you're in a stupid state. Same person, same talent, same abilities, same skill, everything, different state. And so the big process that I teach, the underlying principles of not just asking questions, because the goal isn't to ask questions. The process is using tools to put somebody in the right state, to be in the right state, to condition our state. It's about state management. That is the foundation.
So what do you say to people? Because a lot of my people, a lot of people listening to this show, they're not salespeople. They're not, they're not into this stuff like we are. What do you say to the people that say, like, they're listening to all this, they're like, wow, this is manipulation. I can't believe people can do this to people. Like, what do you say to, like, that? Because I'm sure you've heard that before, where people are like, how can you do this? Is this real?
Well, it's the common answer is this. The difference between manipulation and influence is intent. So you should have a positive intent. And if you have a negative intent, I believe karma is going to come back to you. So always have a positive intent. You just should. It's especially in the social media age, but also the way that I teach people this, like, you could call it influence or whatever you want to call it. I want you to be able to, like, right now, today, minimum, you're going to see 60,000 influence or manipulation devices in the world. Commercials, TV, dings on your Facebook, advertisements, it's all around. I want to show you the process so you can begin to advertise inside of your own mind, to know what's out there. And you can use these techniques to control your own mind because it's happening to you 24/7. And you can be at the effect or you can be at cause. And if you want to be a leader, you should learn this stuff so you can cause more things to happen in your life, because the whole history of the world is the history of emotion. People get divorced, they get married, they start wars, people get in fights, people, start companies, they leave companies. People do everything for an emotional reason. And so you need to understand The world, by understanding emotion, you need to understand your world, your kid's world, your relationship. It's all understanding emotion. And so, being able to, like as they say in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And so, you want to be responsible with this, but yeah, these things could be used for a negative intent called manipulation for sure.
I think it's great. That was a great answer about the process. I don't think most people, I'd say 99 out of 100 people that I run into have no idea or unaware of how they're marketed to, how they're talked to, how they talk to people.
Yeah.
A lot of people's emotional intelligence is very poor, in society today. I think a lot of people could get some help with that. I really appreciate you being so open with some of the information today. I think it's really good for people to be. This is going to be the first time most people have even heard of anything like this. So I think it'll, the people that are interested, they'll go down a rabbit hole with it. And I think that they'll find that the later on in life, the longer in life that you can understand some of these principles, whether you're in sales or not, because at the end of the day, we're always selling something, whether it's to your spouse, your kids, your neighbor. We're trying to get somebody to do something for us, or we're trying to get people to do it our way. I think it's important that they can at least have some fundamental understanding of how to influence or persuade people to do things, so that way they can have a positive outcome. I have this one thing that I've been trying to manifest since UPW last year, and I'm on my way. I want to ask your advice on something. When I was there with my girlfriend and I got to see Tony and his wife on stage, I said, and I wasn't doing any speaking engagements at the time. I was just still the CEO of my company, and I was still trying to figure that out. Yeah. I said, I want to train with Tony Robbins. I want to figure out how to get to Fiji, sitting in a hot tub with Tony and asking him questions, right? Yeah. And I put it on my map for like 2 to 3 years. It was like the goal. And wouldn't you know it, I eventually then met you like a few months later on social media. I'm like, oh, you have a connection. We had like a 3-hour phone call. I remember one night we were talking about sales. I was telling you about one of the guys that helped me with sales, Ryan Groth at Sales Transformation Group. Yep. Chatting about that. Then we were talking about getting some speaking engagements. Well, I've gotten some speaking engagements, and that's going pretty decent. I'm still kind of like learning how to do that. But yeah, how do I get to Fiji in a hot tub with Tony, where he's trying to like help me, like get me trained, where I could like work with him for a couple of years because I really want to have an impact on the world. I really want to be able to inspire people to do more than what they thought they could. Because, I come from an underdog story, just similar to you, similar to Tony. I feel like a lot of us do. What would you say my next steps would be? Well,
there's the one way I did. Dedicate over 10 years of your life and break every sales record and make him lots and lots of money. That's how I did it. Not the easiest path, the actual hardest path, because only one person has done it, me, or his brother-in-law also, but they're also related, so that helped. And then there's the path of, he's got like platinum partners, which is like 600 of them. It's 85 grand a year, but no connection to Tony. And there's Platinum Lions, a smaller group, but you're gonna pay about 300 grand a year to be in that, but still not much of a connection with Tony. And so there's that path. And then there's the path of being a peer. I know even I think Barack Obama waited on a wait list for a couple years to talk to Tony. So you have to be pretty up there. Even at one of the events I was at, I know he did some coaching with Kanye West and Kim when they were going through some stuff. And so Tony, at this point, at this life cycle for him, he's 62 and he's done a lot. And he's got a 1-year-old baby girl. It's hard to get around him. He's doing less. He's not traveling. He's home, but he'll always be doing it. But for me, part of the reason that I was able to connect with Tony and create a friendship with Tony, yes, I did significant things and I have good proximity with his family and all of that. But what made me really powerful in my selling of Tony, there were so many fanboys, and I'm not denying the fact that I'm too a fanboy for life of Tony, but everybody wanted to meet Tony, hang out with Tony. It's never my goal. I experienced something at his events, and it became my mission to help the world by exposing people to the principles that live inside that man. And it became my mission not to be number one for Tony or be seen as great as I wanted to help people. And so we had rapport and alignment based on that because of, 1, similar values to help people, and 2, being relentless, being the best at something like in the world, and just making that my obsession. So we always had some rapport there, and just being relentless. So we had some of that. And then I taught like a 1-day business mastery in Moscow I went there on my own dime. I did an event with him in UPW, but I didn't get on that stage in London with him because of him. I did it through Success Resources, the company that was promoting Tony. And I told them, hey, I'll coach you. And I coached that company, was willing to do it for free. They paid me, did really well. So then they got me on the stage. And so it was undeniable. We were showing up in this, we had proximity, and I didn't get proximity to him through him. I got it in other ways. And so it was undeniable, my results. And he kept on hearing about what I was doing. I trained some of the Fortune 100 companies up in Silicon Valley where I went in there and I killed it. And then people were like, owners of companies say, hey, you got this fucking guy, but at my office. Yeah.
I've been trying to, I've been getting a lot more closer with Gary Vee. I'm a big Gary Vee fan. And,
right.
Same thing that you said, you're trying to get on the peer level instead of the fanboy level, right? Sometimes it's a little tricky, especially when there's such a big gap. I think I've done a pretty good job at that with Gary this year. Been part of his NFT project, and then becoming friends with you and learning from you, and kind of like obviously it's not a fanboy type thing, but it's a respect thing, Yeah. And Steve Sims, and I'm trying to figure out what it takes to get to that level, because there's different levels in life. And I'm just enjoying the process. I'm enjoying the journey, and I really appreciate you being here today. There's 5 questions I asked every guest, 5 rapid fire questions. Imagine you're on an island, okay? And you can put one restaurant on that island. What restaurant? What's your favorite restaurant in the world?
For me, favorite restaurants? I tell you, I eat healthy food now, but I pretty much eat the same thing, and I go on these really extreme diets. So one restaurant would be tough. The one I would say, because they have so many options there, and I love it. I haven't been for a bit, but I had to choose just one. It'd be Cheesecake Factory, because they just have everything.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing.
Lots of calories there, buddy.
Well,
yeah.
I'm on an island. I just got one thing. I got to choose one restaurant.
Right. What's one movie you take with you?
Shawshank Redemption or Gattaca. Those 2 movies.
Just one. Just pick one. Shawshank. I like Shawshank. Let's go with Shawshank. Yeah, Shawshank's a good one. All right, what book? One book.
Think and Grow Rich. That was the foundational book for me. Yeah.
And then you're allowed to take one vacation. Where would you go?
Bali. Yeah.
And then you're allowed to spend 24 hours with one person, past, present, or future, anybody you want. Who you spending 24 hours with?
I'm not a religious person, but I'll say Jesus, just because that dude, talk about a brand that lasted for a long time, 2,000 years, people still talking about him. There must have been some good stuff inside of that dude. And I'd love to just ask him some questions, to have anybody, religious or not, just to see the staying power of somebody who had a message that transcended time and space and has, been pretty cool. So, the legend.
That's good, man. And then, how's anybody get a hold of you? What's the best way to contact you if they want to reach out?
Just we're starting marketing stuff for the first time. I've never done any real marketing. Just posting on Facebook. So we'll have stuff everywhere now. But Facebook, Eli Wilde, and we got a free Facebook group, Elite Level Influence, where we're doing trainings there every week, and people can see some of this stuff in action. Not just sales, and I'll tell stories and give people examples of stuff that I do on calls with credit card companies and things like that, and get a W in the situation for everybody most of the time.
Well, listen, thanks for being here. If you guys got any value out of this podcast, go ahead and like it, subscribe it, comment below, and we'll see you next Friday on the Big Fish Cares podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Big Fish Cares podcast.